Rick Vaive was the first 50-goal scorer in the history of the storied Toronto Maple Leafs franchise. But his accomplishments are often overlooked because he played on some of the most pitiful teams in Leafs history. He'd be named captain at just 22 years old and would reel off 3 consecutive 50-goal seasons. But the Leafs were in shambles, and soon, Vaive's career would be too. While he was winning battles on the ice, away from the arena, he was no match for the demons that would hasten his exit from the NHL and haunt him long after his career was over. This is the story of Rick Vaive, his achievements, his struggles, and his road to redemption. Rick Vaive was born in Ottawa, Ontario on May 14, 1959. His family later moved to Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, where he began his hockey journey. With his hard-shot physical style and strong skating, Vaive caught the attention of junior hockey scouts. He became a star with the Quebec League's Sherbrooke Castors and scored 76 goals and 155 points in 1977-78. That year, the tough-minded right wing was also chosen to play for Team Canada at the 1978 World Junior Championships. Vaive still had one more year of junior eligibility, but the World Hockey Association's Birmingham Bulls were looking to stock their roster with inexpensive junior talent, and thus the Baby Bulls were born. In addition to Vaive, the Bulls signed an all-star teenage contingent that included future NHLers Craig Hartsburg, Michel Goulet, Rob Ramage, Pat Riggin, Gaston Gingras, and Keith Crowder. They'd each be paid $50,000 and be coached by lifelong minor league tough guy John Brophy. Vaive loved playing for the ultra old-school Brophy and scored 26 goals while racking up numerous fighting majors en route to a WHA-leading 248 penalty minutes. He also received some hard knocks along the way. In one notable game, Edmonton Oilers coach Glenn Sather sent his enforcer Dave Semenko after Rick. Semenko delivered a severe beating to Vaive, who had to be assisted off the ice. A few weeks later, Vaive would again be knocked senseless, this time courtesy of a well-placed elbow from 51-year-old Gordie Howe. Hockey in the 1970s was a different world, both on and off the ice. The Bulls were an odd combination of naive teenagers and aging veterans. Rick and the young Bulls learned early on that drinking was an expected part of being on a pro team, and they began to indulge in the Bulls' hard partying ways. For the 19-year-old Vaive, this daily drinking created a habit that would prove to be costly later in his life. Now, as expected, the Birmingham Bulls folded with the WHA upon the expansion of 1979, and in the deepest draft in NHL history, Vaive was chosen 5th overall by the Vancouver Canucks and was paid the standard NHL contract for that draft position, a total of $400,000 for 3 years plus an option year. At first, Vaive struggled to adjust to the pace of play in the NHL, which he considered to be a much tougher league than the WHA. But an even bigger problem was that coach Harry Neal was convinced that Vaive was a heavy drinker and lacked discipline off the ice. Still, Vaive and the hockey world were shocked when in February 1980, he and the Canucks' previous year's #1 pick, Bill Drolego, were traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs in exchange for veterans Tiger Williams and Jerry Butler. The trade was part of a, quote, Friends of Darryl Sittler purge orchestrated by Leafs owner Harold Ballard and GM Punch Imlach that had begun a few weeks earlier with the trading of popular Lanny McDonald to the Colorado Rockies. Vaive got on track in Toronto and finished the season with 22 goals.
Colvin Campbell. Here's the puck out in front, knocked back by Stan Weir. Comes out in front of the net again. Here's Vaive at goal! Ricky Vaive drove it into the corner.
The 1980-81 season brought more tension, drama, and awful play from the Leafs, who were saddled with subpar goaltending and a crew of underdeveloped teenagers on defense. However, Vaive notched 35 goals, and his setup man Drolego added 33, so there was some hope heading into the 1981-82 season. Although Imlach was now gone, the 81-82 season proved to be even more miserable for the Leafs franchise. In January, Harold Ballard's personal crusade against Darryl Sittler finally came to an end when the Leaf captain was traded to the Philadelphia Flyers. The 22-year-old Rick Vaive was then named the 20th captain in Maple Leafs history. Vaive felt unprepared for the captain's role, but enthusiastically accepted it. Although the Leafs would compile just 56 points, their new captain was hitting his stride. After breaking Frank Mahovlich's franchise record of 48 goals a few nights earlier, Vaive would become the first ever Leaf to hit the 50-goal plateau on March 24, 1982.
Derlego working from the point. What is he going to do with it? He's weaving his way in. Over the bounce. He scores! Number 50!
What a play by Derlego, and Vaive was there to finish it off, and he's going to get the standing ovation. Goal number 50. They get him the puck. What a setup. What a setup by Billy Derlego. Just beautiful.
Vaive would end the season with 54 goals, a record that would stand until 2022 when it was finally eclipsed by Austin Matthews. Heading into the 82-83 season, Vaive signed a new 3-year contract valued at about $200,000 per year. Once again he produced, notching 51 goals, but the Leafs continued to lose, earning just 68 points. Meanwhile, the pressures of being the captain of a losing team in a hockey-obsessed market began to worsen some of Vaive's deep-seated anxieties. In his recent book, Catch-22, Vaive recounts how 5 years into his career, he finally acknowledged his nearly paralyzing fear of flying. In order to make it through a flight, he'd regularly consume at least a 6-pack of beer. His self-medicating was noticed and not appreciated by team management. Vaive also conceded that his constant drinking on planes, hotels, bars, etc. began to affect his on-ice performance. This was the NHL culture at the time. There was beer in the press box, locker rooms, everywhere. Vaive's boozing may have been extreme, but he was hardly alone in his excess. In his book, Vaive writes, "Hockey was my escape from the world, but not from drinking. Part of being a good captain means socializing with the team, bringing everyone together. But that meant I was swept up in the party life that helped to undermine my career and my ability to be a disciplined player I needed to be a good captain and teammate." Despite these issues and another last-place finish, Vaive enjoyed his most productive season in 1983-84, compiling a career-high 93 points. And for the third straight year, he hit the half-century goal-scoring mark. Vaive's former teammate, hard-driving Dan Maloney, took over as the Leafs coach in 1984-85, but the Leafs would plummet to a league-worst 48 points on the season. And Vaive, battling neck and shoulder injuries, saw his production drop to 35 goals. Vaive had a rocky relationship with the hot-tempered Maloney, himself a heavy drinker. The animosity between the two came to a head on February 22, 1986, on the day before a road game in Minnesota. The night before, Vaive had stayed out late drinking with former teammate John Anderson, who had since been traded to Quebec and was also in Minnesota after a game there. Maloney called a 7:15 a.m. practice the next day, but the hungover Vaive overslept and missed that practice. Late that morning, an irate Maloney pounded on Vaive's hotel room door and informed him that he was no longer captain of the team. Vaive took full responsibility for his actions and dealt with the public humiliation as best he could. Despite the controversy and the broken wrist, he remained productive and scored 33 goals in just 61 games, and had had 6 more goals in 9 playoff games.
Pass hit a skate, half the line kept in by Salming, centered by, scores!
The following year, Vaive's first pro coach, John Brophy, took the helm of the team after serving as Maloney's assistant for the previous 2 years. Bolstered by teenager Wendell Clark and a group of younger players, the revamped Leafs squeaked into the playoffs and again came within a game of making the conference finals. The Leafs franchise seemed to be on the upswing, but would again crash and burn in 1987-88. Luckily for Vaive, he missed that disaster, as prior to the season, he was traded to the Chicago Blackhawks along with Steve Thomas for Al Secord and Eddie Olczyk. The deal seemed to revitalize Rick as he scored 43 goals playing on a line with Denny Savard and Steve Alumni.
Power play, no score first period. Here's Trent Yanni, St. Louis zone. Right side, Bob Murray. His pass in front, score by Rick Vaive.
After the 87-88 season, Vaive took the Hawks to arbitration and secured a 3-year contract valued at about $335,000 per year. But Mike Keenan took over the Blackhawks coaching role in 1988, and he had little use for Vaive, once referring to him as an, quote, effing floater. Vaive was soon sent packing to the Buffalo Sabres for Adam Creighton, and he proved he could still play by scoring 19 goals in 28 games with the Sabres to finish with another 30-goal season.
Two sends it to Housley. Here it comes to Barger. Here's a pass. They score!
Vaive was suffering through persistent injuries and had 2 more decent seasons in Buffalo, but when Johnny Muckler took over as coach for 91-92 season, Vaive was banished to the bench. Angry and depressed at his plight, Vaive began to drink even more than usual and was finally shipped out to the AHL Rochester Americans. At season's end, the Sabres bought out the remaining year of his contract for about $220,000. Rick Vaive would never play another NHL game. Vaive had hoped to be chosen in the 1992 NHL expansion draft, but was ignored by both Tampa and Ottawa. In 1992-93, he labored through an injury-plagued season as a player-coach with the AHL Hamilton Canucks. By mid-season, Vaive knew his dream of returning to the NHL was dead. In Catch-22, Vaive recalls the end of his career this way. Quote, "It was an ugly ending. I was 33 years old and it was over. It's not how you want to leave. It sucks." Vaive was headed for a dark place in life, but he got a break when, thanks to a recommendation from Brophy, he secured a head coaching role with the South Carolina Stingrays of the ECHL. And Vaive did an outstanding job in Charleston, putting together strong teams for 5 years and winning the ECHL championship in 1997. He also hit a personal milestone after his first year at the Stingrays. After blacking out drunk at a team party, the 35-year-old Vaive swore off alcohol, and he says he remained sober for the next 15 years. Vaive moved to the AHL to take the helm of the St. John's Flames in 1998, but the management of the parent club in Calgary was in disarray, and Vaive received little support. For example, he advocated heavily for two of his players, Martin St. Louis and J.S. Giguère, but was ignored, and both players were discarded to become legends with other teams. Vaive was unexpectedly fired at the end of the 1999 season, but he wasn't informed until July 17, well after every other job opening had been filled. With the 2000-2001 season looming, he accepted a head coaching position with the Mississauga Ice Dogs of the Ontario Hockey League. The team was part-owned by Don Cherry and featured Jason Spezza. Unfortunately for Rick, the inept Ice Dogs franchise made the dog days of Harold Ballard's Maple Leafs look like paradise. Early in the season, Spezza and his agent Bobby Orr forced a trade from the team. The Ice Dogs would finish the season with a record of 3-56-7-2, and that included a 33-game losing streak. After every loss, the meddling Cherry berated Vaive, but always by voicemail. If that weren't bad enough, Vaive's house in Oakville burned down on Halloween night. Cherry fired Vaive at the end of the season. This disaster in Mississauga effectively ended Vaive's coaching career. Nobody would even interview him after that. Things would get worse for Vaive in 2008. Attending the wake of his father-in-law, he and his brother-in-law, former NHL player Bob Stewart, toasted the departed with a shot of scotch. Vaive's sobriety was now over. His alcohol issues accelerated, and his life would soon crumble. Outwardly, Vaive seemed to be doing well, working with Leafs TV, making numerous charity appearances, and coaching minor hockey. But on July 14, 2009, everything changed. After a day of drinking at a golf outing, Vaive was busted for driving under the influence. Saddled with a DUI charge, Vaive became unemployable. Appearances, golf tournaments, TV jobs, they all disappeared. While awaiting his trial, Vaive was named head coach of a minor hockey team. But one night, he passed out drunk, missed the game, and was fired. Vaive had finally hit rock bottom, and with the support of the NHL Players Assistance Fund, checked himself into a rehab center. This proved to be successful. And then on April 12, 2012, under the glare of the Toronto media, he was cleared of the DUI charge.
Rick Vaive walked into court before 2 this afternoon and made a swift exit more than an hour later after a judge found him not guilty of drinking and driving.
Always a family man, Vaive is now a proud grandfather and claims to be sober to this day. He remains active with the NHL Alumni and the Leafs Alumni, supporting a number of Ontario charities. As a hockey player, Rick Vaive's legacy is that of one of the Toronto Maple Leafs' all-time greats, but one whose best years were overshadowed by a dysfunctional franchise and curtailed by a crippling addiction. On October 15, 2016, the Toronto Maple Leafs celebrated their 100th anniversary and righted a long-time wrong by retiring 19 fabled Leaf jersey numbers in a stirring ceremony in Toronto. The number 22 was not among them. Should Rick Vaive's number 22 be retired by the Leafs? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. If you enjoyed this look back at Rick Vaive, check out this classic documentary of another legend of the game.